All right, hello everyone. Um, I'm going to be talking about how gang stalking is connected to human trafficking. Now, I'm going to do another video on this topic because this particular video is going to be about at least my experience with gang stalking and human trafficking and how they're connected through my perception. And then the next video, I'm going to add more information, but through the perspective of those who have been doing research and have been studying about human trafficking and gang stalking and how they're connected. And in the description box below, I'm going to put a link, and it's an hour clip about how gang stalking and human trafficking are connected. So, from my personal experience, how is gang stalking and human trafficking connected? Well, we first have to look at what organizations support the gang stalking program. A lot of it is the religious cults, the military, the banking systems, the corporate businesses, you name it, like the black market, Hollywood. Hollywood in some areas is connected to the gang stalking as well. Gang banging is also connected to gang stalking. There, the key word is gang from gang stalking. You get one half of it is gang and other half is stalking. So you're basically those who are targeted individuals are basically being stalked by a mob of gangs. We're being mobbed. And we all know who mobs are, right? They're tied to the mafia. And everything is connected. So, whatever corrupt organization that you could possibly think of is 9 times out of 10 participating in the gang stalking. Now, what I will say from my personal experience is human traffickers, and I'm talking about perpetrators. I'm not talking about victims. Okay? I'm being specific. Perpetrators of human trafficking are gang stalkers. But not all gang stalkers are human traffickers. Does that make sense? Human traffickers, perpetrators of the human trafficking trade are gang stalkers, but not all gang stalkers are human trafficking. Now let me break that down for those who have no idea what I'm talking about. The gang stalking program is basically a terrorist group consisted of many different kinds of people who have their minds made up that they're going to stalk and harass either a person or a particular group of people. Human traffickers, on the other hand, these people traffic and sell human beings as trade, as chattel. Human trafficking is slavery. Gang stalking, on the other hand, is just harassment, an extreme form of harassment and bullying. Human trafficking is slavery. And in some cases, gang stalking is tied to human trafficking as well. Because if you think about it, let's put ourselves in the shoes of a perpetrator of human trafficking. Now, if you're selling human beings, whether you're selling them for like organ harvesting or you're selling them like sex trafficking or labor trafficking, that type of crime that's like one of the worst type of crimes under murder. Under murder, sexual assault, and pedophilia. It's up there. Human trafficking, that's a very serious crime. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of somebody who is an actual perpetuator of human trafficking. They enjoy human trafficking. They're skilled at it. They've been doing it all their lives, or they're knee deep in it. Their hands are dirty. So putting ourselves in the shoes of a human trafficker, who would want to get caught? Nobody. So a lot of the times, human traffickers, I'm gonna be honest. I'd say about 99.9999 repeating decimal percent of human traffickers are participating in a gang stalking program, and it only makes logical sense that they would, because they don't want to get caught. What they're doing is highly illegal, and if, say, their honorable loved ones were to find out that they were human trafficking innocent people, that's a pretty serious crime. I don't know what traffickers are being charged with in prison. I mean, I feel like that's a crime that's like worthy of a life sentence for sure. But human trafficking, as we all know, is no different from chattel slavery. It's using and selling humans and trafficking them like we would, food, or clothes, or even in some cases on the darker end, drugs. We're basically treating humans as if they are exposable, as if they're just a tool to be used. That's what human trafficking is. And breaking the concept of human trafficking down into two concepts: sex trafficking and labor trafficking. So I'm going to talk about the sex trafficking first. So when it comes to sex trafficking, I want to be very clear. Although, the concept of sex trafficking is very similar to prostitution, I want to break it down for those who do not understand, so that we won't have any communication problems in the future. Sex trafficking and prostitution are two entirely different crimes. Although very similar, they look similar. Prostitution, sex trafficking, two different things. So why do I say that? Prostitution, as far as the American law is concerned, prostitution is a victimless crime. Prostitution, hence a pimp and a prostitute have a mutual agreement. Prostitutes are consenting adults. Now, if we're talking about gorilla pimping, that's an entirely different conversation. But if we're talking about just ordinary prostitution, nowadays you get most prostitutes, they hustling, they're their own pimp. You know what I'm saying? Because prostitution has changed nowadays. Maybe back then it was a little different, where you couldn't really tell, the lines were blurred between the difference between sex trafficking and prostitution because of the gorilla pimping era. But prostitution is an agreement upon two adults, two or more consenting adults. Prostitutes, although it's very unfortunate for anyone. I'm not making light of prostitution. Let me make that very clear. It is it's a very unfortunate circumstance for a man or a woman to be put in a position to where they feel that prostitution is the only way, or it's sometimes desperate calls call for desperate measures, and I'm not judging, but prostitutes have that choice to sell sex for product. Now, victims of sex trafficking, on the other hand, do not have that choice. Victims of sex trafficking, their free will is deliberately taken away from them. Let me make it very clear for those who, They may meet a victim of sex trafficking, and they're probably wondering, well, what's the difference? Ain't that the same thing? Well, if we're going to talk about the concept of trafficking sex, then yes, that's the only similarity. But the difference between a prostitute and a victim of sex trafficking is that the prostitute actually was a willing participant, whether because of low self-esteem or because that's something that they wanted to do and they enjoyed it. Regardless of the reason for the prostitute choosing to be a prostitute choosing to be a prostitute, or an escort choosing to be an escort is a choice. Victims of sex trafficking do not have that choice. That choice was taken away from them the moment that they were targeted to be sex trafficked. Also, victim of sex trafficking may have more than one handler. And I would like to use the term handler because a lot of people, in my opinion, I'm not an expert, but I'm just sharing my opinion. A lot of people use the term pimp in sex trafficking cases, but I believe the correct terminology for somebody who is misusing a person when it comes to sex trafficking is a handler. Same way Freemasons use the term handler when they're initiating someone, because ultimately they're being initiated into something that's wrong and they're being taken advantage of. The only difference is in Freemasonry, just like prostitution, you get a choice to choose Freemasonry. Whereas, like I said, sex trafficking, that's not the case. But in once you get into Freemasonry, you're going to be handled. Just like in sex trafficking. In prostitution, you're going to be handled. But at least you get a little bit more leeway. You get to walk away when you want to. If you ain't dealing with no crazy pimp, with prostitution, you could just walk away and never turn back. Or you can choose to never get involved. The pimp has to provide his, women a choice. It don't matter if people say, oh, well, that pimp is a predator. But that pimp is still, let's keep it real. The pimp is still allowing the woman a choice. Now, when sex traffickers look for victims, essentially when they capture their target, it is kidnap. It's kidnap and it's holding somebody hostage against their will. Sex trafficking is not of free will. Sex trafficking is picking specific people to make money off of through sex by taking away their free will and isolating them from anyone who could help them get away from the handler or handlers. I want to make that very clear because a lot of people who are victim of sex traffickers, a lot of people who are victims of sex trafficking are falsely being accused of being a quote unquote hoe, or falsely accused of being a prostitute when that's not the correct title. A person who was forced into sex trafficking is not a prostitute. Do not label victims of sex trafficking prostitutes. They did not choose. They were forced into it. Call a victim of sex trafficking exactly what they are, a victim of sex trafficking. I know that takes a lot of energy to say the whole title, but you're gonna have to say it because prostitute is an incorrect term. It's like calling a doctor a nurse. That's not the correct title. That's like calling a dentist a doctor. That's not the correct title. Two different things. Very similar in the medical field, but two different things. It's like calling an amphibian a reptile. It's not the same thing. Very similar, probably relatives, but not the same thing. So I wanted to make that very clear for those who are, kind of just now kind of getting into finding out more about human trafficking and really trying to be more understanding towards victims. Just know that when addressing victims of sex trafficking, calling them an escort or a prostitute is not the correct term. It's not the correct term at all. They are a victim of sex trafficking, and that is exactly what they are. That's it. A prostitute is a prostitute. An escort is an escort. It's like calling an exotic dancer a prostitute. It's not the same. You know what I'm saying? So we need to clear that up so that there's no more disrespect. And people who choose to be disrespectful are going to be held accountable for their abusive words. Or the people who are they're making a mistake. We can pull them aside and be like, look, hey, I know you don't know too much about this topic, but a victim of sex trafficking and an escort are two different things. So we can educate people so that we can stop calling each other names like bitches and hoes and sluts and all that, because you don't know if that person is a victim of sex trafficking or not. You don't know if that person is a victim of child molestation. You don't know if that person is a victim of incest. You don't know if that person was sexually assaulted or not. So, I think we as a society, we need to be careful with, what labels we give certain people, because if they were, because how would you feel if you sitting there, you calling somebody a prostitute, and then you find out that they were sexually assaulted, and then you're like, oh snap, I feel terrible, right? And we all make mistakes, so it's fine. But if you're being disrespectful, that's going to look badly off your character. But if you just slipped up and made a mistake because, like I said, you don't know too much about human trafficking, well, here's this video for you right now. Okay? So sex trafficking is terrible. And the victim does not get a choice on whether or not they get to participate. Most of the times, the victim, doesn't know that they're being sex trafficked until it's too late. They don't know that they've been selected to be sex trafficked or human trafficked, period, until it's already happened and the damage has been done. So this is why I'm making this video, so that people can become more aware of what they say, and they can become more educated on this topic, so that we're not insensitive towards people who are victims. Real victims, innocent people who are children. And I want to also make very clear, human trafficking has no limit. They do this to children. They do this to elderly people. You know what I'm saying? And human trafficking has no limit. It's organ harvesting, labor trafficking, and sex trafficking, and drug trafficking as well. Gang banging. All of that is human trafficking, by the way. It's all human trafficking. And I think it'd be fair to say, I think it'd be fair to add prostitution on the list. But I just want people to understand the difference between sex trafficking and prostitution. I really want people to understand. It may all be classified as human trafficking, but let me be very clear. The drug trafficking and quote unquote, prostitution are both victimless crimes here in America, meaning that every participant has a choice. It has chosen to participate in that particular trade. Being in a gang, for the most part, at least nowadays, people choose to be in a gang. Maybe back then, people were kind of forced based on whatever neighborhood they lived in. But, drug trafficking, gang banging, and prostitution are all choices. And then drug trafficking and prostitution are both considered, as far as I'm concerned, victimless crimes. It's still a crime, but are victimless crimes. So 9 times out of 10, say if a prostitute gets caught selling her body, she's gonna go to jail by herself, because according to the United States Census, she excuse me, she made that choice to engage in the illegal trade. So therefore, if the pimp isn't caught, he's not going to get in trouble. If her other, coworkers don't get caught, they don't get in trouble. It's just her. Just like, with drug dealers. Their supplier, if not caught, is not going to go to jail. But if that one particular drug dealer gets caught, they're going to jail. And whoever else gets caught. But if no one else is getting caught, then that one particular drug dealer is just going to jail by themselves. Versus if we're dealing with sex trafficking, labor trafficking, you know what I'm saying? If one victim is found, that's like, a Charlotte's Web to unlock Pandora's box, basically, to handlers of handlers, other victims, people who are, people who kind of suspect what's going on and didn't really have the power to do anything about it. You know what I'm saying? It unlocks so much more. Okay, so I just wanted to break that down. I just wanted to do a quick breakdown of human trafficking. Now, all of them, what they all have in common is that something is being trafficked dealing with the black market. It's all connected to the black market. Something is being trafficked illegally and is connected to the black market. And what they also all have in common is that the victims who get caught up in these services, a lot of the times, are either targeted by somebody that's an overseer, a watcher, a handler, or they participate in it willingly because of, maybe low self-esteem, or maybe they have a toxic family background. It's many reasons why people get caught up in stuff like this. Or they choose to be perpetrators to services like these. Okay? So how is human trafficking and gang stalking connected? That's a good question. I can't really, I would say, as far as to my knowledge, I'm going to have to do more research, but the gang stalking program started during Nazi Germany. This is when they really got the ball rolling. Now the United States government has been participating in the black market since the start of it. Since the beginning of the government. Actually, the United States government has been participating in the black market before the United States government was even created. The military actually was established before the United States government. And we all know, let's just keep it real, the military's hands ain't clean. The military's hands are all up in the black market, has always been since its existence. And the military is really just the knights of the Freemasons. They're the brute force to protect the Freemasons. And we all know that the Freemasons have been participating in the dark arts and the occult since before the since before the Marines have begun. Before the Marine Corps. So, I mean, if we're going to be honest, human trafficking this ain't new. It was just called something else. It was called chattel slavery. It was called all these other things, or mating rituals, or whatever you want to call them, whatever title you want to put on it. It's a different title, same concept. But human trafficking has been going on for a very long time. Very long time. The black market has existed for a very long time, just under a different title. The occult has existed for a long time, maybe just under a different title. It's all participating in evil, trading and selling evil for personal gain. That's what all of this has in common. Okay, so how is gang stalking and human trafficking connected? Um, like I said before, gang stalking really became powerful, and it started and became popular during Nazi Germany, and it started, I believe, in Austria first. Austria was one of the first countries that they practiced these illegal practices in. It was established in Germany against the Jews because the Jews were like target practice for the future of gang stalking. I think it's called Stasi. Oh man, the first word is Stasi. I don't remember the other word, which is a German term. But gang stalking has been official since the 1940s. During the Great Depression. Human trafficking has existed even longer. Now, gang stalking is a tool that was used to keep people in check so that they wouldn't shut down the human trafficking services. Gang stalking was a way to bully people into silence. Gang stalking was a way to get rid of anyone who threatened the human trafficking, uh, the human trafficking power structure, if you will. I believe that was part of the reason why gang stalking was invented, was to ensure that perpetrators of human trafficking would be let off, would either not be caught, would be let off, or evidence could be destroyed. Ultimately, if I, in a nutshell, that's what gang stalking is. Yeah, gang stalking is the muscle behind human trafficking. Ultimately, this is what the I believe that this is what this I believe that this is what this is all about. Because victims targeted individuals of gang stalking are, for the most part, really good people, decent people. And if they're not necessarily a good person, then they are a strong person, and they're willing to stand up against the power structure if it becomes corrupt or it goes too far. Those are the target individuals. You don't see people who really, really, really need to be watched because they're a terrorist on the targeted individual list. You don't see them being blacklisted. Most of the people who are being blacklisted, if not all of the people who are being blacklisted to be on the gang stalking program, are good people, innocent people, people who are strong-willed. And as well as the people who are being human trafficked are also innocent people, good people, people who are willing to stand for something instead of fall for anything the government tells us to do. I just want to make that clear. So, with gang stalking, a lot of times those programs are being used to sniff out potential victims to participate in human trafficking, however the handlers see fit. Like, for example, a lot of minors, a lot of children are brought into human trafficking services by gang stalkers. Gang stalkers could be teachers in schools. Gang stalkers could be they could be cashiers. Gang stalkers could be chefs, right? They could be business owners. Some of them are even pastors and preachers and popes. They could be anybody. A gang stalker could be anybody. Gang stalker has no color, no race, you know what I'm saying, no gender. Sometimes even age doesn't even matter. When it comes to the black market, these people are desperate. Anybody willing to be a perpetrator, they will initiate you as long as you have the code of silence. And there's no limit to what victim they'll choose, because people are only seen as an object to make money off of, to make product off of. So they're tied hand in hand. A lot of people are talking about gang stalking nowadays because it's become more obvious. Well, yeah, it's become more obvious in the routines. I mean, even if it wasn't obvious, I know that not everybody's just paranoid. A whole lot of people are not just paranoid for no reason. And a lot of these people, like I said, are harmless. A lot of them have had clean records before the gang stalking program really turned up the heat. A lot of them, if you find out a lot of these TIs, you do the research on some of these TIs, you find out they're actually really good people. And the people who are gang stalking them are not good people. Anybody that's willing to participate in gang stalking is either a bad person or has a deep character deficit. They have a personality disorder. Like, it has to be something mentally wrong with a person to make them participate. Especially at the extent that gang stalkers do, which is to initiate an unwilling innocent person to be forced into human trafficking. It takes a sick person to be able to point their finger at an innocent person and get them involved in something that they would have never been, chosen to be involved in. It takes a sick person to go to a daycare and pick a child to be sex trafficked or labor trafficked. It takes a sick person to get to know somebody, gain their trust, and then bait and switch on them. And now, next thing you know, they're kidnapped and trapped into a situation that they would have never otherwise been in. It takes a sick person to do something like that. Because a lot of these gang stalkers, believe it or not, some of them could be people that you know. That will throw you under the bus and sell you out, just like with Joseph and his brothers from the Bible. Now, I'm not a Babylonian, I'm not a Christian, but I'm using that because that's basically what they did. What they did to Joseph, selling him to slavery for a couple of silver coins. Like, he was human, like Joseph was human trafficked. And if he wasn't lucky, because he got lucky, by the way. I think he was a chef. And the owner of the house that he was staying at was kind to him. He was lucky because it could have been worse. But Joseph was labor trafficked. And his brothers sold him into that. So sometimes the gang stalkers could be your own family, could be your own friends, so-called, because real family and friends don't do that. But if we're talking fake friends and just relatives, just blood relatives, some of them will do you like that because of envy and jealousy and hatred in their heart. Some of them will do it just because they're just pure evil and they don't care about any human life, and they get off on that. They're sadistic. They think it's funny and it's cute to sex traffic or to labor traffic their own so-called friends and so-called family. It's people out there in this world that are like that. Some of them are the ones that's closest to you. Some of them, you may have never met them before, but they could sense, they sense that they could use you as a victim or as a target. And that's unfortunate, but that's how predators work. Some predators are close to us and some of them are not. Some of them we may have never met them before. But that's how the gang stalking program works. You never know who's a gang stalker and who will throw you under the bus. You never know. So, some gang stalkers will get close to you. They'll want to get to know you. They want to know everything about you so that they can use it against you later. so that they can sex traffic you or labor traffic you for longer periods of time without getting away with it. They know where your strengths are, they know where your weaknesses are, so that they can use it against you for their own personal, selfish, evil gain. And they're doing this to children, by the way. They're doing this to children, by the way. That should be, I mean, I feel like taking away someone's free will should be where the line is drawn. But a lot of times, sometimes we as human beings, we so focused on our life, our own paths and our own lives, that sometimes we're not always aware of what goes on around us. But I think where we can mutually draw the line is children. Like I said, it's a lot of criminals and bad people out here. But I think what a lot of us have in common is where we draw the line with children. Involving children into this is where a lot of us where a lot of us will mutually draw the line. It's some adults out here that will be willing to sell another person out to human trafficking, but they won't do it to a child. You see what I mean? I'm not saying that it's correct to do it to anybody. It's wrong regardless, and it's evil. But a lot of people, the majority of people, it's a lot of criminals and bad people out here, but a lot of people will draw the line at a child. It's like, okay, you know what? I will screw any and everybody over, but where I draw the line is children, innocent children, and pregnant women. That is where a lot of people will draw the line. That is like, okay, no, that's going too goddamn far. That's going too far. It's criminals, killers out there that's like, oh no, you put your hands on a child. Like, why do you think that child molesters get tortured and killed in jail? Because there's a lot of people out there that's like, no, I don't play that pedophile shit. I don't do that pedophile shit. I don't play around with that pedophile shit. I'm a killer. I'm a gangster. I'm this, I'm that. I may be fucked up in the head. But I draw the line it's a lot of people that draw that line right at where children is at. They willing to do any other crime in the book. But touching children and hurting children is where a lot of people will draw that line. And you know what I'm saying? Like, seriously, a lot of people draw that line at hurting a child. You hurt a child, you gotta go. And I agree. You put your hands on a child in any way, shape, or form other than to help that child grow, taking care of that child and nurturing that child. If you hurting that child in any way, shape, or form, you gotta go. Means killing children, molesting them, you gotta go. And that's what I agree. Like, that's one thing we all can agree on. We all can agree on that. That's going too damn far. Sex trafficking and labor trafficking children, that's going too goddamn motherfucking far. Too far. And trust me, I was born and raised in the hood, and I understand how easy it is for somebody to get caught up in the crime life. Especially being a quote unquote minority. It's very easy for us to get caught up in the black market, because realistically, it just is. Like, I'm not trying to use the black card or, cry wolf, but the reality of the situation is life is hard, and it a lot of the times is very unfair, and if people are here, they got mouths to feed, they got children to take care of, they got bills to pay, and you know what I'm saying? We dealing with this corrupt ass government, right? Because we got gang stalkers on one side, a lot of the times pushing us out of work, because that's what gang stalkers do. And then on the other hand, we got easy money from the black market. Now, I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do, but say if you're a circumstance where you're a single parent and you got 5 kids, and the gang stalkers then, messed up your life so much to where they forced you out of work, and the only easy money you got is to sell drugs to feed your family. You can't make money off of a book, and you can't eat a book. Reading a book is not a job, and you can't eat a book. So don't let these uppity peppy, pappy, happy, sappy, holier than thou, most of the time occult members tell you that, oh, you always had a choice, because realistically life is fucking hard already, and these gang stalkers are not making it any easier. These occult members and these goddamn Freemasons and these, crooked ass veterans are not making it any easier. These crooked ass religious people, I'm not talking about the ones who actually believe in what they preach. I'm talking about the crooked ass ones that know the bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Doing shady ass shit because they're hating on you because you're walking a straight and righteous path. So they want to, make your life harder through the gang stalking program. We good people out here. Y'all know what the fuck I'm talking about. Y'all know the bullshit. With the police killing black men and innocent black children. Like, we know what the fuck they're doing. And it's hard out here. Families got to take care of funeral expenses and shit. Already got bills to pay and not getting paid enough. It's hard. It's hard not to do the wrong thing. It's hard not to participate in the black market. I'm not making excuses, but it's really hard. It's really hard. And the gang stalking program is not making it any easier. The corrupt government, the Vatican, they're not making this any easier on us. Now, if we were to put ourselves in a position where a lot of us, we become insensitive when we talk when talking about subjects like these. A lot of us, we become insensitive until it becomes personal. A lot of times we don't realize how cruel something is until it happens to us. So, we can sit there and we can make fun of somebody for how they are until we find out about their life. Like, I'm gonna just name an example. And this is going to be a testimony for me. I'm a victim of human trafficking. I was labor trafficked, and I was sex trafficked. I had the worst of the two. I had both, unfortunately. I had the whole goddamn the whole goddamn regime on my ass. I was labor trafficked and I was sex trafficked. Now, anybody that is a victim of molestation or sexual assault knows the dangers of being sexually assaulted, whether it's through molestation or through rape or through sex trafficking. So when somebody is being sexually abused, there are, let's just say, indicators and evidence and traces that kind of become obvious over an extended period of time, especially if someone is being sexually abused for a long period of time. It starts to become very obvious. So I'm going to name a couple of things based off of my personal experience being sexually abused. I as much as I would like to say that I know when I was being sexually abused, I know that I was being sexually abused ever since I was a child. I want to say 3 as far as I can remember. But I want to say that I had been sexually abused ever since I was 3, but it could have been earlier than that. And from my personal experience being a victim of sexual abuse, there's indicators that become very obvious over an extended period of time that sexual abuse is being taken place. Number 1 is a short fuse, a short temper. That's 1. Number 2, a bad body odor. A bad body odor. Number 3, obvious signs on the body of a possible infection or STD. Number 4, becoming hypersexual or overly sexual in inappropriate moments. Number 5, knowing way too much about sex and the details of sex and certain labels of sex and how sex goes at a very young age, knowing how to have sex and knowing a lot about sex at a really young age that is extremely inappropriate for a child to know or experience. And I'm talking younger than the teen, younger than a teenager, younger than 16. I can't think of any more. Oh, oh, well, I can't personally relate to this experience, but I've seen this in other people who have been sexually abused. But drawing pictures of body parts of female or male genitalia or naked bodies, having an obsessive artistic talent for the nude body. Basically, people have an excessive need to draw the genitalia of the body, or just drawing a nude body in general, constantly, over and over and over again. Another one I can't personally relate to, but I've seen this in other people who've been sexually abused, but developing a sex addiction. You know, people who have a lot of the people, majority of the people who have a sex addiction were molested at a very young age, and they experience sex way too young. And those are the obvious indicators that someone has been sexually abused, was molested, or has been sexually abused and is still being has been sexually abused for an extremely long period of time, or is still being sexually abused to this very day. Those are indicators that become very obvious. So when people, a lot of times we don't know, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors in people's private lives, nor is it any of our business until those signs become very evident. Those signs are a cry for help. Now, whether the victim wants to get help is their choice entirely. But when we see these signs in someone, it's not appropriate to make fun of them or to laugh. The best response is to help that person, is to make people who have authority, who are willing to do their job correctly, more aware of victims of sexual abuse, or sex trafficking specifically, but sexual abuse as well. Because a lot of times when we see these signs in people, we laugh and we make fun of them because we either don't understand or we're making light of the situation. And a lot of us, we do it unintentionally, but the reality of it is we need to be held accountable for what we do and say nowadays. We are in the age of technology where pretty much any information you could possibly find is available to the public. So it may not be in a book, we may not be able to find it in some of these libraries, but we can find it on the internet. And it's time to hold people accountable for being insensitive. It's one thing to be, unaware and foolish or ignorant of this topic. But now people are talking about it more and more. We need to hold people accountable for their cruelty. Okay? So when people have a bad body odor, a lot of the times that comes from being sexually abused or sex trafficked. That person either has an infection, they might have an STD, or they might just have a hormonal or a pH imbalance because they are being forced into having an excessive amount of sex. And we all know the process of a sex. We all know what sex smells like. Okay, we're adults here. We can be mature about this. Okay? We all know what sex means, what activities that sex includes, and it leaves behind a smell, especially if someone's being forced into having sex when they didn't agree to it. And by the way, when someone's being sex trafficked, specifically, because I'm gonna talk about labor trafficking in a minute, but since I'm on the topic of sexual abuse, specific, like someone who's being just sexually abused may be able to hide it a little bit better. Because if a person knows that they're being sexually abused, so they have a little bit more free will to wiggle around and kind of take better care of themselves, or say their abuser is focused on not really bringing too much attention to the sexual abuse, that person is going to be more likely to be either a little bit more well taken care of, or the abuser is going to allow the victim to take a little bit better care of themselves, so that the abuse is not found out. Now, with sex trafficking, on the other hand, it's almost like a humiliation ritual, if you will call it that. Victims of sex trafficking are intentionally being publicly humiliated. Because if somebody's being sex trafficked, the damaging effects of being sex trafficked, you don't know how many times that person is being forced to have sex a day, and for how long that's been going on for. Right? So let's just say a victim of sex trafficking is forced to have sex 20 times a day for 10 years. Right? That's going to have an effect. That's going to affect that person's pH balance. And we don't know what type of people that they're being forced to have sex with. Just the same with escorts and prostitutes. But people of sex trafficking have less free will. They don't have free will at all. They're being forced to have sex with whoever the traffickers and the handlers are forcing them to have sex with. Whoever is willing to have sex with that victim of sex trafficking, that's who that person has to have sex with. And that person isn't even getting paid. So that person is being handled, like a hammer, like a toolbox. And they're not even getting paid. So how's that if that person is, you know what I'm saying? If someone's being sex trafficked, how do they have time to work? And if they're not getting paid, how do they have the resources to be able to buy clothes, shoes, hygiene products, let alone keeping themselves clean, keeping themselves looking good, smelling good, feeling good, healthy, right? How are they going to do that if the gang stalkers, the handlers, and the traffickers are controlling like 90% or more of that person's life? And then a lot of times, like I said, these human trafficking services are so cruel that they intentionally set people up for humiliation. Such as, and in this particular case, when we're dealing with sex traffickers, they know that sex leaves behind a smell, so they'll intentionally set a person up to be publicly humiliated. It's cruel, it's evil, it's cruel. But this happens, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience. I know this has happened to other people. It's embarrassing to talk about, but the reality of it is, not only do we need to hold people accountable for their cruelty and their insensitivity, but we need to educate. It's our responsibility as victims of human trafficking and gang stalking to make the public more aware and educate the public so that people can be held accountable for what they do and say. It's understandable that it's a lot of people out there that don't know about human trafficking. Understandable, because it's in the black market, it's hidden. But stuff like this needs to be, widespread so that people can't get away with this type of stuff anymore. A lot of innocent people have gotten caught up in human trafficking and died because of human trafficking, and they didn't deserve it. And it's our responsibility as normal, healthy human beings to get help when we spot someone being trafficked or we suspect that someone's being trafficked. Because the reality of it is, if we know that somebody's being trafficked and we do nothing about it, that blood is going to be on our hands. Especially if it's innocent children. And that's when the universe is going to respond. That's part of the reason why humanity is struggling as it is today, because a lot of times we get selfish until, a lot of times we want to make fun of somebody because they're different. We want to make fun of somebody because of how they are as a person, not considering what they had to go through. We want to sit there, we want to be quick to make fun of somebody, but we don't want to ask them why they are the way they are. We know a lot of times we're quick to point the finger and persecute people before they even get the chance to speak. And then a lot of times we're sitting in guilt. When we find out what that person had to go through, we sitting in guilt because we judged that person before we even got the chance. That person didn't even get a fair trial. Come to find out they were an innocent victim of human trafficking. And now a lot of us feel like shit because we made fun of somebody that was a victim. And that needs to stop. That type of immature behavior needs to stop. So that we know the difference between those sadistic narcissists that like to make fun of people for any and everything, and ignorant, immature people who don't know better. We need to be able to decipher so that we can properly judge people now. Because when it comes to situations like human trafficking, especially human trafficking children, the judgment needs to be made and the fingers need to be pointed. And there's no more time for excuses when it comes to stuff like this. Because, it's a lot of bullying going on in schools. It's a lot of school shootings. It's a lot of kids out here dying. And we don't know why. Or we do know why, but we don't want to talk about it. I'm willing to talk about it. I'm willing to put my foot down and say that some of these innocent people that we like to make fun of, that we like to judge and bully and harass, are victims. They're good people. And I don't care how good of a person you are. It's only so much a person can take before they snap. And if anybody put yourselves in the shoes of somebody that was human trafficked, or say let it happen to one of your kids, how much you want to bet that you ain't trying to shoot or kill somebody? Come on, let's just be real for a second. Let it be one of your kids that was human trafficked, I bet you wouldn't be laughing now. I bet you wouldn't be so quick to point the finger and make fun of that person. I bet you'll shut up real quick. How much you want to bet if you find out that you've been trafficked for 10 years and it went under the radar? And now that you find out about it, you know what I'm saying? You getting all this debt, all these court charges, these tickets and stuff, the police pulling you over while you getting trafficked. You know what I'm saying? Like, these gang stalkers, they have no moral boundaries. You know what I'm saying? They have no limits when it comes to covering their tracks, even if it means sending an innocent person to jail. Even if it means coercing an innocent person into committing an illegal crime to tarnish that person's name. If that's not cruelty, I don't know what is. And it's time that we hold the human species accountable for its cruelty, because it's bullshit at this point. The planet Earth and humanity has been here for millions of years. It's no reason why we should be ignorant to topics like these, especially human trafficking. We just came out of chattel slavery just a few hundred years ago. And it's still being practiced. And a lot of us turn a blind eye because it's not us. It's not our family members until it is us, until it is one of our family members, until we're forced to step up to the plate. Innocent children should not have to die behind this. Innocent children should not have to die behind corporate greed. Innocent people should not have to be targeted and their free will taken away because someone's envious. Those days are over. It's time to hold people accountable for their actions and stop enabling their bullshit. It's time now. It's time to hold people accountable for their actions when they abuse people. It's time for us who know that this is wrong and don't support it to step up and say something or do something instead of watching people suffer. Because guess what that creates? Bad karma. And then it happens to one of your kids and now you're mad now. But you didn't say nothing when you saw somebody else getting beaten the shit out of and human trafficked and assaulted, and you wasn't saying nothing then. But now it's your child. Now you're upset. You should have been upset. We need to be angry now because this is a crime. Human trafficking and gang stalking is a crime against humanity. These activities are illegal and they're only going to continue to grow and prosper if we keep enabling it. turning a blind eye to it and blaming the victim, making fun of the victim, allowing the victim to be isolated, humiliated. That's blood on your hands, people. It's blood on our hands. When we sit there and we watch innocent people getting persecuted, executed, ridiculed for being victims of human trafficking and gang stalking, that's evil. And when we pacify that, we're no better than the perpetrators. That's blood on our hands, and that's bad karma that we are accumulating from turning a blind eye. When a victim reaches out for help and we ignore them, that is blood on our hands, people. This is why we have the pandemic. This is why the universe attacks us with natural disasters. When we ignore evil and we participate in it for our own personal gain, that is not okay. And I'm coming down hard on the human species for that. It's no goddamn way that we should be doing this shit. Still, have we not learned from the Egyptians? Have we not learned from the Romans and the Greeks? Have we not learned from the Europeans and the Turks, the religious groups, about this shit? We've all learned this before. All of these groups of people have suffered the negative consequences to human trafficking. People have lost their lives. How many times do we have to have these conversations? This is wrong, people. It's wrong. And I'm not talking to these narcissists because they're never going to change. Narcissists are a lost cause. But I'm talking to normal, healthy people. Get it together. When you see human trafficking, call the services. Call the human trafficking services. Call the police. I don't give a damn about people talking about, oh, you snitching. Fuck them. If they're willing to watch a child get human trafficked, then they deserve to die. They deserve the death penalty if they're willing to allow children to be human trafficked. If they're willing to perpetuate children being human trafficked, they deserve nothing less than the death penalty. That's blood. That's innocent blood on our hands. And the universe does not play about that shit. The universe is not playing about that shit. This is why we're suffering as a human species. It's too many resources out here. There's too many resources out here for us to be greedy. It's too many opportunities, too many jobs for us to be acting like this. And then we wonder why some of us is dying from natural disasters and diseases. You want to know why we're dying? People, human beings? Since everybody wants to play hopscotch and ignore the clear war that's being declared on humanity, I'm willing to talk about it. I'm willing to be the bearer of bad news. I'm willing to be the asshole in this situation and say, humanity, we not doing good. We're at war. It's principalities out here. Evil principalities that are attacking us, that are testing our boundaries. And when we ignore shit like this, like human trafficking and gang stalking, because of fear, because of pride, because of envy, because of greed, that's when the source will make us pay for that. And then we'll be around here looking stupid when we're getting consequences for not doing the right thing. It's time for us all to speak up. If you know about human trafficking, open up your goddamn mouth. If you know somebody's being sexually abused, physically abused, emotionally abused, open up your goddamn mouth. Help that person, especially if it's so many goddamn victims out there who have reached out to these hotlines, these services, these resources. And what did these goddamn resources do? Oh, well, did you try other resources? Oh, well, did you try calling 911? Oh, did you try talking to trusted family members and friends? Well, if I had trusted family members and friends, I wouldn't need to come to you. If I had resources, I wouldn't need to come to you in the first goddamn place. Everybody's sending goddamn resources and referrals, but don't nobody want to do the right thing. The police don't want to do their goddamn job. People want to just turn a blind eye until it's your goddamn motherfucking son or daughter. Then you want to get gangster. What was all that gangster energy when you saw all this shit happening to innocent people and you ain't say shit and you ain't do shit? Where was all that gangster righteous energy when you sold your goddamn friends to human trafficking? What was all that goddamn energy then? But now you want to get gangster when it's your child. I bet you do. That happened for a reason. Because you saw this shit happening. You saw this shit happening to innocent people and you ain't say shit because you was selfish. Some of y'all out here are selfish. And I'm holding the ones who y'all know who I'm talking about, the ones who know exactly what's going on and have known for many years and ain't say shit. Y'all were selfish for that shit. And y'all was wrong for that. And for some of y'all that are perpetrators out here selling innocent people out here, some of these people trusted you. Some of these people trusted you. And what you did was you sold them out to evil. How could you do that? How could you turn a blind eye? How could you throw somebody under the bus for some riches? For a spot at the top of the ladder? How could you? How could you not use your talents and your gifts? How could you just sell somebody out like that instead of doing it the right way? Every human being on this earth has potential that can reach beyond the skies. Why the fuck would you sell another human being out for your selfish gain? And then looking sideways when you sitting in a jail cell, got a life sentence now. Or you sitting here looking stupid now because one of your children got trafficked. Or one of your close family members or somebody you love and care about end up dead because of this shit. Now karma missed you and hit somebody that ain't have nothing to do with it because of your actions. That's how karma works sometimes, is that unfortunately innocent people who are close to us get hurt because of our bad actions. Now you somewhere crying, talking about I didn't know better. I just didn't know, and I was the first family member to graduate college, and I was the first family member to make above $100,000 a year, and I just didn't know better. Like, no, motherfucker, you knew better, and you didn't care until you got caught or something bad happened to you, and now you know how it feels. Or now you're being held accountable. Now all of a sudden you've somehow developed a conscience. It's time to hold people accountable. I'm not talking about people who don't know what's going on. That's obvious. I'm not talking about people who don't know what's going on. This whole video is to make people aware who don't know what's going on. The people who don't know what's going on and, they're made aware. Okay, I can understand that. Because at one point, we're all ignorant. We all don't know no better until we learn. But for the people who know better, that's who I'm getting on. That's who I'm upset with. The people who know better, who knew they should have said something sooner, who knew they should have did something differently, and they had the power to. And for some of us victims of sex trafficking and labor trafficking and human trafficking in general, a lot of us don't have the power to say something right then and there. Some of us are in danger. Some of us are, entrapped or being held hostage by our handlers. So we can't necessarily just be like, excuse me, I'm being human trafficked. Excuse me. Over here. But for the ones who had the power to stop it, who had the authority, who had the opportunity, and didn't do anything, that's Those are the people who I'm getting on right now. And the perpetrators who compromise with pure evil to get what they want. So I just talked about sex trafficking. Let me talk about labor trafficking. It's not a whole lot that I have to say about labor trafficking because labor trafficking is short and sweet. But what I will say is victims who are being labor trafficked, um they're being forced to work for little to no pay. Most of the time they're not getting paid at all, especially if they're being labor trafficked. If they're being labor trafficked, they're most of the time they're not getting paid at all. Most of the time their quote unquote payment is in food, clothes. It's basically necessities for survival, but they're not given any money, any monetary compensation. Their finances are not being improved by their services. The whole purpose of human trafficking is for people to be under control, and for the handler of the perps to have ultimate control over the money and over people. Or most of the time it's really just over wealth. So it could be gold, it could be resources, whatever. They want to have complete control over human beings and resources because of greed. So with labor trafficking, most of the time, the victim of labor trafficking is not paid at all and not given any credit. So say, for instance, labor traffickers are responsible for construction services. Like, say, I'm just using this as an example, but let's just say every KFC branch was built by labor traffickers. And this is just an example. I'm not saying that KFC was built by labor traffickers, but as an example, let's just say every KFC in the entire United States was built by labor traffickers. And all of those labor traffickers not only not getting any corporate rights, any credibility, or any monetary finances for their hard work. And the corporate business and the owners of all these KFC branches are the only ones that are making money, and none of the labor traffickers are making any cut, and they're not being given any legal credit, like a percentage or anything like that. And in the contract, they're not even on the contract. It's as if they didn't even exist. That's labor trafficking. Labor trafficking is, the transatlantic slave trade, where people were forced to pick cotton and corn, and a lot of them, they were quote unquote indentured service, but really that's just a nice way of saying labor trafficking. I don't care what nobody says. The indentured service servants, they worked 12 hours a day, sometimes more than that, and they were only paid 20 cents the entire day. Some of them didn't get paid at all. That's disrespectful to have somebody working until their hands bleeding and their feet swollen and they got blisters. You know what I'm saying? Their body is reacting to being overworked, and some of them are only given a quarter a day. That's disrespectful. That's disrespectful. Some of them have kids to feed, and if they didn't have money, they weren't able to feed their kids. They weren't able to put clothes on their kids, but just barely a thin piece of cloth, if even that. Sometimes it was hot, sometimes it was cold, and they didn't have jackets. You know what I'm saying? And they were only paid 25 cents a day. Imagine how disrespectful that is. Working your ass off for 18 hours a day, and you're only getting paid a quarter. That's labor trafficking. I mean, even still now, only getting paid $10 an hour. Some of the toughest jobs, only paying $10, $15 an hour. And some of these jobs that, these entrepreneur jobs that you really don't have to do much, they getting paid millions just to sit on their ass. And some of these people who working their ass off 7 days a week only getting paid $10 an hour. That's labor trafficking, in my opinion. The whole corporate establishment is a huge labor trafficking enterprise. And ever since the pandemic, they've been raising up the prices. Minimum wage has not been increased, but they made sure to increase the prices. They made sure to increase the gas prices. They made sure to increase the prices of everything else, but they sure ain't increased minimum wage. That's labor trafficking. Also, in the music industry, a lot of these musicians are either personally responsible for labor trafficking or they're participating in it for their own personal gain, such as certain musicians. Like, for example, let's just say like a rapper, he makes an album, has a producer on it, but doesn't give the producer any money or any credit for creating like more than half the album. Or say a singer songwriter, sorry, not song, a singer having an album or even a career for that matter, and that musician having ghostwriters, and those ghostwriters are not paid or given any credit in the music. That's labor trafficking. And sometimes in Hollywood or in this industry, whether it's music or it's the movie industry, the film industry, sometimes they have people who put in work and they don't get credit, or nor do they get paid. It's some people who are screenwriters, but the director may get all the credit for the screenwriting. And there's other people who've contributed creative ideas or wrote some parts of the story, and they may not be getting credit. They're not getting credit and they're not getting paid. In any circumstance where someone contributes ideas or they do the whole goddamn thing and they're not being given credit and they're not being paid, that's labor trafficking. I don't care what nobody says. Stealing from somebody, stealing somebody's hard work and not giving them credit is a form of labor trafficking. It may be indirect, it may not be forced, but it is labor trafficking. So it's time to hold people accountable. Also, using someone's legal status against them to pay them little to nothing is also a form of labor trafficking. It's wrong. It's wrong to use someone's legal status to pay them less than you pay other people, or to not pay them at all, and to basically be like, okay, well, if you work for me for free, you can stay here in the United States. Well, what's the point of being able to stay here if they can't pay bills, if they can't feed their family or themselves? They can't buy clothes for themselves, little to nothing, or just barely enough to feed their family and buy clothes, but they can't even accumulate any real wealth or get their legal status because they're not getting paid enough. And then it's hard out there in other countries, like people who are coming from South America. It's hard out there, and when they come here for a better life, only to find out that they're being labor trafficked, and they're being put in a position to where they're stuck because they can't get an ID. They don't have proof of identification, right? It's hard. They can't get their social because they don't have proof of citizenship. And whoever they're working for is squeezing them by the thumb. That's a form of labor trafficking. Very exploitative. Very. Excuse me. So how is that, like I said, I've asked this question a bunch of times, but I'm going to ask it again. What does gang stalking have to do with any of that? Well, I'm glad I asked that question. Gang stalking is to ensure that human trafficking stays afloat. Gang stalking is here to put people who if given a fair opportunity for their full potential to expand, they would have the power to change things in a better way, to where perpetrators of human trafficking would no longer have the power that they have. Corruption would no longer have the power over people's lives that they have. And gang stalkers, what they do is when they target people, they pretty much watch your every move, listen to your every conversation, read your every email. And I'm quoting that from the Boondocks, by the way, from the episode, season 1, episode, I want to say episode 4. It's called The Real, where Exhibit Pit My Ride comes to visit Granddad's house, and he pimps out Granddad's car, and Huey has that secret government agent following him around. That's basically what TIs have to go through on a daily, except for in that particular circumstance, that government agent, you know, he was alright. He wasn't annoying like gang stalkers are, and he gave Huey some space. And he was only in that one episode. He was watching Huey all the time, but he kind of came out of the shadows to give Huey a warning. Most gang stalkers are don't have that sense of nobility, or at least that moral compass. A lot of gang stalkers will be all up in your face like that government agent was all up in Huey's face, but they do that 24/7. And they do little subliminal things to let you know that, they know what you're doing. They heard your conversation. They heard what you said. They know what you're doing, and they want you to know that they're watching you. Whereas in that particular episode, he was hardly ever there, just to, like I said, put his 2 cents in with Huey and then dip. That's not Gang stalkers are not that subtle, and they're not that noble either. I got to give that government agent some credit. It seemed like he had a bit of a conscience, whereas gang stalkers don't, in this day and age, do not have a conscience. They don't. And some of them know exactly what you've been through, by the way. Some of them know that, like for me, my gang stalkers knew that I was human trafficked, and they made fun of me for it. Most of them knew what happened to me in my life, and they showed no mercy. So that's a pretty good example of someone not having a conscience. Like, I mean, just think of it. Being a normal human being, finding out that somebody was molested at a young age, human trafficked by their own family members, and gang stalked right after that and sabotaged. I know for me, if I was a gang stalker and I found out that somebody was an innocent victim to human trafficking, I would have a bit of a conscience and take it easy on them. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't even know if I'd be able to gang stalk them. But say if I was coerced or threatened into being a gang stalker, because some of these gang stalkers are gang stalkers because they were threatened, they were forced. Some of them are not pure evil. Most of them are, but there are some gang stalkers that they're only that way because they felt like they had no other choice, and I completely understand why. I know how it goes. It's just a miracle that I'm still here, because trust me, the gang stalking program and the human trafficking tried to take me out. And I'm still here somehow, surprisingly. Because I was given many opportunities to join, and I didn't want to, because I wouldn't be able to live with myself being a gang stalker. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. I'd rather be a TI than a gang stalker. No one wants to be a TI. But in my particular case, I'd rather be able to look myself in the mirror and say that this is happening to me because I chose to do the right thing, not because I chose to humiliate, ridicule, and abuse an innocent person who's already been traumatized. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. But I have a conscience. These gang stalkers, on the other hand, don't. And some gang stalkers, you can kind of tell which ones have a good head on their shoulder, and they're doing it because, they feel like they have no other choice. Like, say they got a family to feed or whatever, and they just kind of being sent to watch you. Some of them, they'll just kind of watch you, and they'll leave you alone. Or they may even, some gang stalkers have put me up on game. because I could tell they really didn't want to do it, but they had kids, they had mouths to feed, they had a family to take care of, they had bills to pay. You know what I'm saying? Their career was on the line. And so a lot of them, some of them just watched me. Some of them helped me out a little bit. Some of them put me up on game that they didn't necessarily have to do. Now, I'm not giving gang stalkers credit, but let's just say after being gang stalked all my life, it becomes a little bit, the gray area becomes a little bit more, it becomes a little bit more clear, the gray area. And then it becomes more clear the black and white as well. Who is being forced into this, and who is a willing participant that enjoys the negative narcissistic supply that they get from hurting innocent people who've already been traumatized. It becomes very clear who's who. And then the gray area for the people who kind of have a dark side, but they like, if you give me a reason to mess with you, I will. But if you don't give me a reason to, then I don't really feel the need to. You know, it's like that black, the gray, and then the white area. You know, and it becomes clear after being gang stalked for 20 plus years. It becomes very clear who's who. Take some time, definitely, and through hard experience to figure out who's who. But it becomes very clear after a certain period of time. Because I mean, it's only so many times you can change your tactics when you're abusing someone. When you're abusing someone, you can only change your tactics so many times before it becomes clear, you know, just off sight what your intentions are. Right? I mean, when we get older, some of us get wiser, and we kind of pick up on certain things that people don't necessarily have to say out loud, right? And if you're a victim of human trafficking, you can kind of sniff out a person that could be a potential perp, right? If you're a victim of human trafficking, you can sense somebody who maybe even could possibly help you. Like sometimes, you know, we learn to survive and adapt in environments that we grow up in. And if you're a victim of human trafficking, you kind of become a little bit more skilled and crafty and witty, even when it comes to identifying a perp and a victim, or somebody that may not be involved in this at all, but they could really help you, or somebody that is a victim just like you. You know, you may be able to tell by the clothes the person is wearing. You may be able to tell a person is a victim by the way they speak, by the way they walk. You know, by the way their body language. You might be able to tell by that. You might be able to tell a perp by the tone of their voice. You know, it's just certain things that we pick up. Victims of human trafficking and gang stalking. You know, it's things that we pick up after going through that type of torture, that type of abuse for so long. You know, we pick up on certain things. We do. So, yeah, gang stalking basically is just a program that's been set up to help human trafficking and the black market expand. I believe that is the whole purpose of gang stalking, to make sure that certain agendas are fulfilled, certain corrupt agendas are fulfilled, and that human trafficking and the black market expand. But the reality of it is, we can take power away from the human trafficking services and the gang stalking program if we speak up and we tell our personal stories, or we help people who need help, especially if we're in a position to help them and we can, and it's not too much of a risk, or say some of us may be willing to make that risk. You know, we need to help these people. If we're in a position to help people, we need to help these victims of gang stalking and human trafficking. Because when we help them, and when we stand up for each other, and when we have each other's back, it makes it harder for gang stalkers to keep doing what they're doing. The whole point is to divide and conquer, so that good people don't unify and put a stop to this. That's the whole point of the gang stalking being connected to human trafficking. That's the whole point. To keep good and healthy people apart so that we don't shut this shit down. It's to stop good people from taking their power back from the evil. That's what this is all about. So when we take a stand and we tell our stories, whether it is human trafficking or, childhood abuse, whatever our childhood traumas are, we need to talk about it. It needs to be talked about because, we as human beings nowadays, we too damn hard. And we end up having to pay a much bigger price. Because all on the outside, we may seem perfect, we may look perfect, but our lives are jacked up. And we know it. We could tell. We all fucked up. I don't care if you're rich, poor, black, white, male, female, adult, child. Our lives are fucked up. We're miserable. Humanity sucks. It sucks right now. And until we all take accountability, for a part that we had to play in this, if we are responsible, or, we all tell our stories, then there could be a change. But that's never, ever, we're never, ever, 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 ever going to get what we want until we're willing to make that risk and step up and woman up and man up. And take responsibility for our part to play in this, if we have a part to play in this. And if not, we need to tell our stories, and we need to help these people who are asking for help. Victims of human trafficking and targeted individuals are not asking for much. A lot of times we're asking for our freedom. We're asking, or a lot of it, we're not asking, but just saying, we making demands. We want what was stolen from us. Our time, our energy, the blood, sweat, and tears that we had to sacrifice, the hard work that we put in when we were labor trafficked. We want the credit, and we want our money. We want our reparations, because human trafficking is slavery. We want our damn reparations. So don't just give us our money, but stop shutting down these extracurricular programs and building up these greedy ass corporate businesses that don't nobody even care about. Start, put more budgets towards the school system. Stop cutting out these extracurricular activities. Put money on some of these books. Stop buying these kids iPads and shit. Put the money towards the school books so that we can actually learn something. It's a whole lot that we don't learn in school that we find out later on in life. We putting all this goddamn money towards greed, these greedy ass corporations, and what are they doing for us except human trafficking and gang stalking us? What else are they doing for us but taking our time, our youth, and our labor? What else are they doing for us? Not a goddamn thing. So what we need to do is we need to fight for our rights. We need to stand up for ourselves and each other. And we need to hold the corporate businesses and the United States government, or just the government worldwide, accountable. It's too much money out here in this world for there not to be extracurricular activities for kids and adults. It's too much money out here for people to be starving. It's too much money out here for people to have to participate in the black market to survive. It's too many resources out here for people to be hungry, broke, and homeless. It's just way too much out here in this world. The gang stalkers are aware of that. Perpetrators of human trafficking are aware of that. They just don't want you to know that. So they set up these gang stalking programs to bully people into submission, to harass people, so that they can distract people from learning more and more and more about how the natural way that things work. That's what they do. The gang stalking program is a one big smokescreen and a distraction and intense bullying. Human trafficking, on the other hand, is a violation of human rights, and it's slavery. And they're taking people's credibility away. So we have to decide when enough is enough. The more innocent children have to die and be human trafficked for us to step up to the plate. Does it have to get to the point where gang stalkers are and or not really so much gang stalkers in this particular circumstance, but does it have to get to the point where human traffickers are so comfortable with the crimes that they commit, they start posting this on TV, they start showing this on the news, and we could become desensitized to this? Is this what the point that it's gotten to? Is that where it's going to have to get to wake people up to see the horrible, horrible things that's going out here in the world? The people, you know what I'm saying? Because if we keep just pacifying this, human traffickers are going to be so comfortable that, shoot. I mean, why do you think that there's child pornography out there? It's because human traffickers have gotten so comfortable that they feel like they're not going to face consequences for their actions. And for the most part, they're not, because ain't nobody saying nothing. Ain't nobody willing to step up to the plate and tell their story. Some people are, but it's a lot of people out there that have been human trafficked and are targets of gang stalking, and they're not willing to talk about it. And then they'll be quick to criticize and put down somebody else that is brave enough to. When the reality of it is, we all need to be telling our story. We all need to be sharing our painful experiences so that people can learn and grow from this. So that generations to come and the children that exist now in this day and age can learn from our mistakes. They can learn from our experiences so that this type of behavior can stop. It'll never get better if we don't tell our stories. It'll never get better if we present this picture perfect image. It'll never get better. It'll always get worse. And it's going to get to the point where it's so all up in our face to where we have no other choice but to act, but to respond. What point does it have to get to for you to where you decide that standing up for what's right is worth the risk? Does it have to get to the point where one of your family members is human trafficked or gang stalked or a victim of a senseless murder? Does it have to get to the point where you see human trafficking and gang stalking to the full extent on TV to where it's like brutal for you to do something? What is it going to take? Does this have to happen to you in order for you to decide that enough is enough? At what point is the line going to be drawn for people? I know for me, the line was drawn when I found out that it happened to me, and I found out that they were doing this to innocent children. That was where I drew the line. The fact I didn't even know about human trafficking. I really didn't know, and I found out. I found out when it was me, and when I found out that they were doing this to so many other innocent people, and that they were doing this to children. I had to step up and say something. I had to step up and do something. And now that I'm sharing this information to those who either was kind of confused about it, like they had some suspicions, but they were kind of confused about it, or for those who had no idea, and now that I'm talking about this, it's like everything is unraveling for you. Great. But now it's time for us to speak up and do something about it. It's time. We need to work hard, and then we can play hard. We put forth some effort, when we've made some progress in shutting down these human trafficking services and holding gang stalkers accountable for their illegal behavior, then we can celebrate. Then we can go out and have fun and go to the club. But we need to do something about these children being human trafficked. So now that I've talked about sex trafficking and labor trafficking, and I've talked about the difference between sex trafficking and prostitution, now I'm just going to say a little bit about organ harvesting. It's not really a whole lot that I know, but what I can say about organ harvesting is what they do is they target someone, kidnap them, take their organs out. Some people live to tell the story. So they end up drugged, kidnapped, and one of their organs, they find out one of their organs is missing. And then they live to tell the story. They dropped off somewhere in the alley. Now, a lot of times when it comes to organ harvesting, in order for it to be legal, you're supposed to wait till the person is dead, and you're supposed to follow their will. So if they don't have a will, that's one thing, and they put that they're an organ donor, at the end of their death, that's one thing. But if you're doing it while somebody's alive, and the whole point, the whole reason as to why the whole purpose of their death was to be organ harvested, that's illegal. Now, it's one thing if they die from some other cause and their organs were used. Say they didn't write a will, or their will was specifically written to be an organ donor. That's understandable. But to kill somebody to take their organs, or to kidnap somebody and take their organs and then drop them off without giving them a dime, that's organ harvesting. And I know that they talked about it on this episode of Family Guy when Brian and Stewie went to South America, and they were dealing with illegal immigrants that were working, and they went to South America. I think as they were coming back before they came back to America, there was some guy that they were talking to, and he got kidnapped, and they took out one of his kidneys and then dropped him back at the same spot he was at. And he found out about it, and he wasn't able to do it about it because the people who took his kidney, they left no trace. And then that was when they went back to America, and they took some illegal immigrants with them, and they rode along with them, and they got back to where they was at. And the illegal immigrants, kind of found a way to, I guess, work in America. But that's the point. A lot of it's connected. Organ harvesting is not really talked about here in America very much because we have laws around it. And if it happens, then, you know what I'm saying, somebody can get into some serious trouble behind that. Let's just say that. But organ harvesting is not really talked about here in America because it's illegal, and there's laws to protect us from that. So, yeah, it's kind of harder to get away with it here in America, but in the U.S. But it happens a lot in South America and other countries as well. So, yeah. Is there anything else? So I talked about sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and organ harvesting. I also broke down how gang stalking is connected to human trafficking. They're not the same thing, and for the most part, like I said, human traffickers are gang stalkers. Most of them are. 99% of them are. They are, because they have to be gang stalkers in order to maintain, their shady business. They have to. Or else, they stand a chance of getting caught or losing control over their success. And if they lose control over their success, and they spent all their lives working for the black market and they don't know how to do anything else, well, that's their whole, it's become a career. And if they lose control of the victim, say the victim could possibly say something. Some victims don't say anything, but, some human traffickers, they're so paranoid of the victim exposing them that they have either already become gang stalkers before they became human traffickers, or the human trafficking business has made them become gang stalkers because they're paranoid. Human traffickers need control. If they lose that control, then they could possibly be exposed or lose everything. So they're at risk. Like anybody whose whole entire career or their entire income is based off of something illegal. Of course, they're gonna want to be in control at all times. They have to be, or they stand a chance of losing everything, including their freedom or their life, and the control over the substance and over other people. And you know how us human beings, when we're in our ego state, When we're operating only from our ego, a lot of times, we can be very controlling, very, and nobody wants to lose control, especially over their own life, right? So imagine how the mindset of a gang stalker and a human trafficker whose entire income, status, wealth, even maybe even happiness comes from having control or feeling superior to others. And then they lose that all in one day because they either got caught or karma hit them. So that's why the gang stalking program, I believe, was created, to have complete control over human thought and human activity and resources. And human trafficking is here because of greed, pure greed. And in some cases, envy is involved too. Envy is definitely involved. For some people, it's envy. For some people, when it's envy, it's personal. Now, when it's just pure greed, a lot of times it ain't personal. It's just, you got what I want, and I'm willing to stoop very low to take what you have, or to get you to do all the hard work so that I don't have to, so that I can benefit from the fruits of your labor and you get nothing. That's if you get what I give you. That's the mindset of these human traffickers. The mindset of these gang stalkers is, you have a light within you. You're going down the straight and narrow path, and I'm either jealous of you because I'm not a chosen one, or I'm jealous of you because you have light and you have control over your impulses and I don't, or I'm a sadistic asshole who just likes to mess with people, and the gang stalking program gives me that legal leeway to do so, even though what I'm doing is illegal. And if I'm ever held accountable and the courts act accordingly and with just, I'll be going to jail for a very long time. But because I know the system is corrupt and the police and the fire department and even some of the judges are involved in this, I know that I'm going to get a slap on the wrist if I get caught. So I get to do whatever I want and get paid to do it. That's great. That's how some of these gang stalkers are thinking. And then the ones who are a little bit on the lighter side are like, look, I really don't want to do this, but I can't afford to be a TI. I got kids, I got a career, I'm in a position of power. I can't, but I'm not willing to harass you. I'm willing to watch you, and if somebody takes it too far, I'm willing to put a stop to it, but I got to watch you. I got to do this. My family is important to me, or my life is important to me. And I'm not making any excuses because they're still doing the wrong thing, but I understand. With people from that perspective that can be blackmailed, and trust me, I bet the gang stalking program has blackmailed a lot of people. The gang stalking program tried to blackmail me, but I couldn't be bought. But yeah, the gang stalking program has bullied, coerced, and in even some cases forced people to do what they didn't want to do. They're not supposed to do that, but they have. And that's just the reality of the situation. So that's all I had to say on that. I hope that clears any questions on what is human trafficking. What's the difference between human trafficking and the black market, and basically how is gang stalking tied to human trafficking. I hope that clears up any questions, any misunderstandings, and I'm definitely going to do a part 2 on this subject. Peace.